Hello everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Horizon Next by Niveus, where we explore the latest innovation and trends in the world of technology. I'm Prathiksha Kamath, Cloud Specialist Customer Engineer at Niveus Solution and your host for today's podcast. With the increase in the adoption of digital world, it becomes quite important for us to continuously assess, monitor and protect these digital assets and landscape. And that's exactly where we are today in today's episode going to explore how SecOps helps us there. And for further discussion on the same, we have two distinguished guests with us. First, we have Mr. Suhan Shetty, who has been a part of Niveus Solution and has helped us in evolving the SecOps practices here and heading our customer engineering team. Hello, Suhan. Welcome to the podcast. And the second guest for today is Omkar, who has been an expert in cloud infrastructure and also the SecOps practices at Niveus Solution and is a principal architect.
Thank you.
Hello, welcome Omkar to the podcast today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think, Suhan, one of the first things when we talk about the digital world and the ever-evolving technologies, we see there are different jargons. There is DevOps, there is DevSecOps, there is SecOps. Now, these terminologies are very similar, right? It sounds very similar and quite a lot of times becomes very challenging for us to comprehend because the words, the terminologies become very difficult for an individual to get into insides of it. So could you maybe help us understand what is SecOps and what are the base principles around it and how SecOps helps organizations? If you can maybe shed some light on that.
Yeah, thanks for this, Prathiksha. So imagine we're starting an organization, right? What would be the fundamental thing? So you would reach out to your operations team and say, you know what, let's have an infrastructure up and running, right? And then the operations team is always thinking about how do I keep my application up and running the whole time. And then you get your developers to build these applications and see to that it is deployed into these infrastructure which is given by the operations team. The challenge here is the developer team is constantly looking at adding new features and the operations team is always constantly looking at managing the existing application, right? That is the fundamental rift or the challenge between them. So they're always working against each other. Now, how do we fix this problem is when the DevOps steps in, right? Now, the DevOps would see to that all the codes which are written by developer goes into these infrastructure created by the operations team in a very seamless manner. But there is one underlying challenge. If the developer is not conscious enough or looking at vulnerability in the libraries he's using, or if the operation team is not conscious enough of safeguarding creating the right infrastructure or securing the infrastructure, both of these application infrastructure and the data created by them are all vulnerable. So a DevSecOps is actually DevOps which is conscious about security, has inculcated the best practice of security at the application, infrastructure and the data governance bit. Now, why would an organization need a SecOps if that's the case? A SecOps is an overarching practice around not only DevSecOps, also monitoring once all of this goes into motion to monitor these infrastructure application is where the SOC practice comes in, correlating the security challenges and so on and so forth. A SecOps is basically an operational aspect of not only doing SecOps, DevSecOps, SOC, but also doing two other bits, which I think as we go forward in this podcast I'll talk about. I think the last bit you would also be interested to know is, does SecOps impact application infra or data? The way you would look at this is, if you're wanting to secure your infrastructure and the building, imagine, let me take it this way, right? Imagine you're all going to build a building here. The first thing you'd want to do is the whole perimeter is cleansed, right? There is no vulnerability in the infrastructure. So you would put a fence around it. That's called a perimeter in the cybersecurity world, right? And you would put a guard there. Now in the cybersecurity, we call this an NGFW, right? Then you would see to that the whole building you're building has CCTVs in it. This is what is a CSPM for us. So this is the second layer. So where my infra is secured. But then on this infra, unless until I put an application, there is no revenue, right? So, but the application itself need not be vulnerable. It has to be very, very secure. That's where I would put something called a code security. I put sonar cubes, I would put multiple other things as part of my CI/CD to secure them. The end result of infrastructure and application coming together is a data layer. The data is the gold. We constantly talk about data is the gold, right? Now this data If somebody ultimately of all of this journey, if the data is stolen by somebody, it makes no sense to have this infrastructure or the application. Securing the data is the ultimate goal, and that's where the data governance tools comes in. So a SecOps is, if DevSecOps talks about infrastructure and application together, the SecOps practice talks about all of these together in a very sustainable way. So I'm hoping that answers your question.
Yes, that definitely answers the question. Now we are able to understand and distinguish between DevOps, how an additional layer to it is DevSecOps towards our vision of having security practices, and then how SecOps helps us not just ensure security is limited to the application side of it, but it's an overarching and is something that is beyond the application as well.
Yes.
Right? So for any organization, they can have DevOps, they can have DevSecOps. It becomes an application maturity aspect. But to get started with DevSecOps, Omkar, do you feel there is any maturity stage that the organization has to be in? Or is it something that they are, SecOps as a practice is open forum which organizations can get started and then build it, through their journey?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. I think for any organization starting their journey in the cloud, right, security becomes a very important pillar. And so the short answer is they should be starting it from day one. The maturity of the SecOps as a practice might differ as they continue their journey in the cloud. But as a practice, right, there is, it will be from day one. Okay, so when any organization starts a cloud journey, we will take them through something called as landing zone, where we will have workshops with the CISO and all security professionals to understand what are the controls they want, what are the access management they want, what are the tools that they would want to adopt for various different purposes, right? Like for infrastructure, as code, they would want CheckOV or some other static code analysis tools. For network security, they might want to go for an NGFW, right? And for SIEM, they would want a particular tool. If they have a lot of VMs to manage, they would want to have a PIM-PAM solution. So it all differs, right? And security operations, like whether they already have a SOC team or not, they would want to make sure that their engineers are getting onboarded to support cloud-based securities and vulnerabilities that would foresee in their journey, right? So starting from early on would give them a very solid understanding about what controls they are putting in their organizations to make sure that their cloud is secured.
Got it. I think that is really great. So if we can, by the inputs given, if we can summarize that, when we talk about SecOps, there need not be any maturity level an organization must have, but it is more suggested to start this, as a day one activity.
Yeah.
That way, you have a very good view of how your infrastructure is and how secure it is, right? So with that, I think Omkar did give us insights on, getting started with that, how it looks like, maybe perimeter security or maybe something to do with network security and things like that. This is all that happens, in the very beginning. But when we talk about SecOps, it's not just about laying the foundation of security practices, but it has to be continuously managed as well, because that's where the ops aspect of it comes into picture. So, Suhan, maybe you could give us some of your thoughts and inputs on how we look at sustained maintenance of this security practice and not just getting started with it.
Sure. I think that's very important, right? What we have done consciously is we've broken SecOps into 4 pillars, right? And these are 4 offerings for us. The first offering, and that's I think the question you asked, right? How do you start? Not everybody would know where to start. That's where the first help you would need is to assess your existing business, existing infrastructure, and your other parameters, right? So we would start with assessing. That's the first offering we would do. The second thing is, once that you have assessed, we would give them a report. And sometimes customer asks, can you help us with compliance, right? Not everybody is worried about, the immediate problem sometimes is not to help them fix a minor bug or something or vulnerability, to even to get them a compliance, you need security, right? So that is the first thing we do. We help them assess, we give them a report, and we also see to that their end journey of getting compliance is also met. Once that is done, the second portion, there are few customers who would know what to do, but they've also identified the tools, but they would need support to set it up in the first place. So second offering we do is what we call as prevent and detect. What we do there is, I spoke about multiple places, right? We have WAF, we have perimeter, we have network, we have cloud as a whole, then there is a correlation aspect of it, and so on and so forth. Each of these can be addressed with multiple tools, right? So we would help at each of these layers to put the right tool there, which is basically to prevent or detect, right? Once this is done, the third set of customers we would have is people who are worried about, we know what to assess, we've got the tools there, but the challenge here is the signals from all of these are not mixed, right? So there's an NGFW which is getting some signals, and then there is the CSPM telling me certain things. Can we correlate them into a certain thing, right? That's where we have a SOC practice, right? What we do in that is we have practitioners who would look at correlating them, building policies, automating them, building runbooks, and so on and so forth. So the customer's journey in terms of correlating this is made easier. The last bit, I think the last set of customers are basically who need all of this happening today, tomorrow, and forever, as you told about sustenance, right? And the third offering, ironically, the offering is called sustenance, right? So we assess, we set up the tools, we monitor, and we sustain it. In which the last bit, we actually do all of this in a continuous way. That means the biggest benefit you would get here is we would manage these tools for patching, upgrading, setting them up with new changes if required, sending you reports, helping with compliance, so on and so forth. And all of this done not at the cost of individual resource, but at the number of frequency you want this product to work for you. So I think these are the 4 pillars we would always focus on.
So I think that was great input, Suhan. I think we understand how a SecOps would work and how the sustenance happens.
Yeah.
And with that, we also understand how we as Niveus focus on our SecOps offering. So I think with that, we come to another question here is one, what is the key differentiator that we bring in with our SecOps practice? And also on any use case of where we have done SecOps implementation for our customers. Maybe Omkar, if you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question. So what we have done is we have taken the security practice and we offer this as a subscription model for the customer. And the reason is that the customer might be like, depending on the requirements, right? They might be multi-cloud, or they might be focusing on a specific cloud. There are various regulatory bodies and compliance requirements that they have, right? And so for that reason, and also another challenge that the customer face is basically all the security professionals that they would hire, right? They would be tool specific knowledge that they've got, right? So what we would do as Niveus, right? We would go there and we would not only install all the tools, but also help them with the management of those tools and operating of that tool, right? And also we will be going across the clouds, so that will be great, and also it will be a subscription model. So we have done this kind of implementations in various different degrees for various clients, doing the assessments for SOC implementation or ISO 27001 and in different areas as well. So this would include like infra security, then network security, data security, you've got application security. So we will, the key differentiator there is like we don't concentrate at any one thing. We will, stick very close to the customer and understand their requirements, and also, go all hands from a security operation point of view.
Got it. I think that is really great that we are not very tool centric,
Yeah.
but we look at how the customer already has set up his landscape, right? So we try to align with that and then define the SecOps principles with what either assess and analyze whether those tools and services adhere with the SecOps or are in direction of having SecOps practices, and then accordingly suggest the best practices. I think that is really important as well. I think thanks Omkar for that. Suhan, from what Omkar has highlighted, we understand how we envision and set up practices in customer environments. So I think that is really great. I think you both have given us great insights throughout this. Coming towards the end of the podcast, I just wanted, if you can maybe give us some inputs and thoughts on, what are the key takeaways that, our audience can have from this podcast, and any other use cases that we have done beyond the ones that we discussed with Omkar as well would be helpful.
I think this is how we looked at this problem statement, right? And I would want all of us, across whatever position the audience is and whatever they're doing, from a business context, the problem you're solving here is, we first, if you look at our offerings, one conscious thing we have done here is we have actually looked at what journey is a customer at. Do they have a security practice or no? If they're not, let's start with assessment. They've started it, they know where they are, and they want us to fix it one or two tools, like Omkar mentioned about the landing zone. If you're somebody starting out your journey or somebody are very advanced, you would still have tools. You need organization policies and all of that governance layer. We would fix it with the landing zone. Or at that extreme end, you're a super large enterprise who has a large scale of people, PIM, PAM, SIM, SOAR, everything, right? We would do that journey for you. We would set up those tools for you. This third customer here is who has set up all of this. Imagine like a DN, right? They've set up all of this. The problem is, as a DN, you're constantly at your edge. You have to innovate. Operationally managing or looking at these things at scale is not an easy thing. So SOC, our monitoring practice of ours, comes into more, lot of sense there. The last bit is, imagine your enterprise, not a IT-centric organization. You're a manufacturing. You would not, your primary skill set would not be to manage a cloud premise, right? Or do the security bit for it. The sustenance makes a lot of sense there. So one thing you would want to take away here is in Niveus, and I think if you are looking at SecOps also, you look out for partners who have looked at customer at where they are, right? So I think you said we are customer centric, we are not tool centric. That's what we do. The other end of it you would see here is, you would also want to identify, if you are an organization and wondering where should I first start my security bit with, right? You can actually, this is one vertical from a maturity bit. The second vertical you could also look at, the second dimensions you could also start looking at is in terms of what area do I have to protect, right? Should I look at my infra? Then we have tools around that, like WAF, or you want to protect your network, you want to protect your cloud, infra assets, all of that. Or if you are somebody who would help customers with the data, right? That the challenge today here is the ransomware attacks. You have the malicious codes, or command and control, phishing attacks. All of them are trying to get the data out of you, right? So you would want to reach out to Niveus or any partner for that matter to understand, how can I protect my data, right? So that is an also dimensions you can look at. So you could look at backup tools in case of ransomware. You can look at for tools to provide the ransomware, to detect ransomware, to detect phishing. I think one of the key things you could also look at is understand the MITRE framework itself, right? And that's where the SOC practice make a lot of sense, is your attack didn't happen on day 1. It might have happened on day -100, right? It was planned very, very early. The only problem we did in the whole process is you're not connected or correlated the signals, right? Somebody accidentally had a privileged access and went down. Did you see that, right? These are things. So this is another dimension you want to look at. What are the areas I want to protect? What area of maturity are we as an organization? The last bit is you would also want to understand the fundamental aspect, which is your landing zone itself, right? So what kind of landing zone do you need to have? What kind of business context I want to fix? So the key takeaway I would want to summarize here is, understand what is your key requirement, what you want to protect, where you are in your journey, and do you want to meet compliance or not? This would give you a holistic understanding what kind of security SecOps practice has to be tailor-made for you. And that's the offering Niveus is giving. Niveus is giving you a tailor-made, personalized offering based on where you are.
Great. I think that has been really great, where we understood, throughout the discussion, what is the differentiator between DevOps, DevSecOps, SecOps, and how we at Niveus envision SecOps practices, and how we help customer with our tailor-made offerings to, enable their SecOps journey.
Yeah.
Right. So thank you, Suhan, thank you, Omkar, for your time and giving us all these inputs and insights. It's been really a great discussion to have. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Thank you. Thank you all. I think with this we come towards the end of our discussion for today. And stay tuned with us for more updates on technology. Until then, bye-bye. And please subscribe and don't miss to click on the bell button. Thank you.